I never thought the day would come when my own son would pick up the phone and call the police on me. Not for a real crime. Not because I hurt anyone. But because he wanted control. My name is Edward Miller. I'm 67 years old. And this is the story of how the son I raised, protected, and sacrificed everything for tried to destroy me with a single lie. Before I begin, if stories about family betrayal, truth, and quiet revenge resonate with you, take a moment to subscribe. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, city or country. If you've ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted, you're not alone. Now let me take you back to the beginning. I raised my son alone for most of his life. His mother passed away when he was just 8. From that moment on, every responsibility fell on me. I worked long hours, missed vacations, skipped dinners, ignored my own health. Everything I did was for him. I taught him right from wrong. I paid for his education. I helped him start his career. I even let him move back into my house when his first marriage failed. That was my first mistake. At the time, I didn't see it that way. I saw a broken man who needed his father. So I opened my door and my heart without hesitation. But something had changed in him. He wasn't grateful. He wasn't humble. He was impatient. Always asking questions about the house. About my savings. About my will. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself it was normal curiosity. That he was just planning his future. I was wrong. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. His voice was calm, but his eyes were calculating. "Dad," he said, "you're not getting any younger. Maybe it's time we talked about arrangements." "Arrangements?" I asked. "Your finances. The house. Power of attorney. Just in case." Something about the way he said just in case sent a chill through me. "I'm perfectly capable of handling my own affairs," I replied. His jaw tightened. That's when I saw it, irritation. From that day on, things shifted. He became distant. Cold. Almost strategic. He started documenting everything I said. Every disagreement. Every moment I forgot a small detail. I didn't realize he was building a narrative. Then one morning, at 6:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. 2 police officers stood outside. "Mr. Miller," one of them said, "we received a call expressing concern about your behavior." Concern. That word still makes my stomach turn. They said my son reported that I was unstable, aggressive, a danger to myself and others. None of it was true. But lies don't need truth to cause damage. They just need authority to repeat them. I was escorted out of my own home in front of neighbors who had known me for decades. I wasn't arrested, not yet. But I was humiliated. My son stood on the porch, arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. That moment broke something inside me. At the station, I answered questions calmly. I told the truth. I asked for evidence. There was none. But the damage had already been done. By the time I returned home that evening, locks had been changed. Changed. On my own house. A notice was taped to the door, temporary restraining order, requested by my son. For safety. I stood there, holding that paper, realizing something terrifying. This wasn't panic. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was a plan. I stayed with an old friend that night. I barely slept. My mind replayed every conversation, every warning sign I had ignored. And that's when I decided something. I would not react emotionally. I would not beg. I would not confront him. I would observe. Because people who lie always get careless. The next few days were quiet on the surface, but loud beneath. My lawyer confirmed what I suspected. The accusations were vague. Emotion-based. Strategically worded. But then came the court summons. My son had pushed it further. He wanted legal control. And he believed the courtroom would give it to him. What he didn't know was this: I had kept records. Emails. Text messages. Witnesses. I had also raised him, which meant I knew exactly how impatient he could be. And impatience always leaves fingerprints. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in a small rented room, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Because once lies enter a courtroom, they don't just get challenged. They get exposed. And the truth has a way of ruining those who underestimate it. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. And most importantly, I didn't reach out to my son. Silence, I learned, makes guilty people nervous. While he was busy telling his version of the story to relatives, neighbors, and anyone willing to listen, I stayed quiet. I let him believe I was weak, confused, overwhelmed. That illusion would become his biggest mistake. My lawyer and I met every other day. Not to argue emotions, but to build facts. We laid everything out on the table. Phone records. Text messages. Emails where he pushed me to sign documents I had refused. Messages where his tone shifted from concern, to frustration, to thinly veiled threats. Dad, don't make this difficult. Dad, this is for your own good. Dad, if you don't cooperate, I'll have no choice. Those words read very differently in a courtroom. What struck my lawyer the most wasn't what my son said, it was when he said it. Every message came right after I refused to give him control. Every escalation followed a boundary I wouldn't cross. That pattern mattered. Meanwhile, my son grew bolder. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard stories. How he walked around like the house was already his. How he spoke about me in the past tense, as if I were already gone. He's not well, he told people. I'm just protecting him. That lie spread faster than the truth ever could. A week before the hearing, I received an official notice. Temporary access to my accounts was frozen, pending court review. That was his doing. He thought pressure would break me. Instead, it clarified everything. The night before court, I sat alone again. This time, not in fear, but in reflection. I thought about the boy he once was. The little hands that used to grip my fingers crossing busy streets. The voice that used to call for me when nightmares struck. Somewhere along the way, love had turned into calculation. And tomorrow, that calculation would be tested under oath. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Quiet. Neutral. No drama. No raised voices. Just truth, and the absence of it. My son arrived confident. Well-dressed. Prepared, or so he thought. He avoided my eyes. I didn't look away. When proceedings began, his attorney spoke first. They painted a picture of an aging man, unstable, forgetful, unpredictable. They spoke softly, carefully, weaponizing concern. I listened without reaction. Then my son took the stand. That's when I saw it. Confidence mixed with impatience. He spoke smoothly at first. About worry. About safety. About responsibility. But when the judge asked specific questions, cracks began to form. Can you provide examples of violent behavior? He hesitated. Well, there were moments of anger. Documented moments? The judge pressed. He glanced at his lawyer. Not exactly. I could feel the shift in the room. Then came the messages. My lawyer presented them calmly. No accusations. No emotion. Just timestamps. Context. Patterns. Each message placed side by side with my refusals to sign over control. The judge leaned forward. My son's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked at me. Not with anger. With fear. Because now, the story wasn't about concern. It was about motive. The judge asked him directly. Were you seeking legal authority over your father's assets at the time of this report? He paused too long. Yes, he said finally. But only to protect them. That answer did more damage than silence ever could. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. I didn't attack. I didn't accuse. I explained. I spoke about boundaries. About independence. About a son who didn't hear the word no well. I spoke clearly. Calmly. The judge watched me closely. Not like a man judging a case, but like a human assessing truth. By the end of the session, no ruling was made. But something important had already happened. The narrative had cracked. Outside the courtroom, my son finally approached me. "Why are you doing this?" he asked under his breath. I looked at him, truly looked. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm just telling the truth." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because once lies are spoken out loud under scrutiny, they don't age well. And my son had many more words left to explain. The air was heavier. Quieter. Like everyone in that room knew something important was about to surface. My son arrived late. That alone told me a lot. The confidence he wore on the first day was gone. His steps were quicker, less controlled. He avoided eye contact, not just with me, but with the judge. Fear does that to people. It makes them sloppy. The judge opened the session by addressing inconsistencies from the previous hearing. No accusations? Just questions. That's when I realized something crucial. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was about credibility. And my son's was cracking. His attorney tried to regain control. They requested to introduce a witness, a neighbor who had supposedly observed concerning behavior. I almost smiled. Because I knew exactly who that neighbor was. An elderly man 2 houses down. Hard of hearing. Rarely outside. And more importantly, someone my son had spoken to repeatedly after I refused to sign those documents. The neighbor took the stand. He seemed uncomfortable. Confused. When asked about my behavior, his answers were vague. Contradictory. "I might have heard shouting," he said. "I think. I'm not entirely sure." The judge frowned. Then my lawyer stood and calmly asked one question. "Sir, how many times had you spoken to the petitioner before today?" The neighbor hesitated. "Well, a few times." "How many is a few?" He swallowed. 4. Maybe 5. "And were those conversations before or after the police were called?" Silence. "Before," he admitted quietly. That single word echoed louder than any accusation. The judge leaned back. Bias had entered the room. Next came something my son never expected. My lawyer called my doctor. Not a random physician. My longtime primary care doctor, someone who had treated me for over a decade. She testified calmly. About my mental clarity. My independence. My consistent evaluations. "No signs of cognitive decline," she said. "No aggressive tendencies. No instability." My son's attorney objected. Overruled. The doctor continued. She explained that my son had requested medical access months earlier. That I had declined. That after I declined, my son stopped attending appointments with me. That detail hit hard. Because it showed something undeniable. Concern doesn't disappear when control is denied. But manipulation does. My son shifted in his seat. For the first time, the judge addressed him directly again. "Why did you pursue legal intervention rather than medical evaluation?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then said something that sealed his fate. "I didn't think it was necessary." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Yet you believed police intervention was?" That was it. The room felt colder. Then came the most devastating moment of the day. My lawyer introduced the recording. A voicemail. Left by my son. On my phone. Sent weeks before the police were called. His voice played through the courtroom. "Dad, you're forcing my hand? If you don't sign, I'll do what I have to do. Don't make me take this further." The silence afterward was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. The judge looked down at the bench. Then up at my son. "This is not concern," the judge said evenly. This is coercion. I didn't feel joy. I felt relief. Because the truth had finally stepped into the light. And it didn't need me to defend it anymore. Court recessed early that day. Outside, reporters had gathered. Not many. But enough. My son was surrounded. Questions fired at him. I walked past quietly. He didn't follow. That night, alone in my rented room, I stared at the ceiling again. But this time, my thoughts were clear. I wasn't fighting my son anymore. He was fighting the consequences of his own choices. And tomorrow, the court would decide what those consequences looked like. No rush. No whispers. Just a heavy stillness that settled over the courtroom like a warning. My son arrived early this time. He looked different. Not angry. Not confident. Smaller. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped together, as if holding on to something that was already slipping away. The judge entered without ceremony. No speeches. No dramatic pauses. Just purpose. And when a judge carries that kind of calm authority, you know decisions are already forming. The judge began by summarizing the case. Not emotionally. Not judgmentally. Fact by fact. He spoke about the police call. The restraining request. The attempted financial access. The medical testimony. The voicemail. Each point stacked carefully on top of the other. By the time he finished, the room felt unbearably tight. Then he said something that changed everything. "This court is not here to decide family emotions," he said. "It is here to determine intent." He paused. "And intent has been clearly demonstrated." My son's attorney stood quickly. They argued stress, miscommunication, fear. They tried to reframe coercion as concern. But the judge wasn't listening anymore. Because once intent is clear, excuses lose their power. Then the judge turned to my son. Not harshly. Not kindly. Directly. "You involved law enforcement without evidence," he said. "You sought control without medical justification. And you misrepresented your father's condition to gain authority." Each sentence landed like a quiet blow. "I find that deeply troubling." My son swallowed hard. For the first time since this began, his voice cracked. "I was just trying to protect him," he said. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Protection does not require deception," he replied. "And it does not begin with threats." That was the moment. That was when my son's illusion finally collapsed. The judge ruled. The restraining order was dismissed. All frozen accounts were immediately restored to me. Any attempt at guardianship or control was denied in full. But then came something my son never expected. The judge addressed consequences. He ordered a formal notation of misuse of emergency services. A warning placed in legal records regarding false reporting. Not criminal charges. Something worse. A permanent stain. Because in professional and legal worlds, credibility is everything. And my son had lost his. Outside the courtroom, the shift was instant. The people who had once listened to his story now avoided his eyes. The same relatives who whispered about me stood quietly as I walked past. No one stopped him. Everyone watched him. The truth doesn't shout. It isolates. Later that afternoon, my lawyer handed me paperwork confirming full restoration of my rights and property. I signed calmly. Not triumphantly. Just finished. As I stepped outside the building, the air felt lighter. Not because I had won, but because I had survived. My son followed me. Not running. Not shouting. Just trailing behind. "Dad," he said softly. I stopped. Slowly turned. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller than he ever had. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. I studied him. Not with anger. Not with hate. With clarity. "You didn't think about truth," I replied. "You thought about outcome." He opened his mouth to respond. I raised a hand gently. This court didn't ruin you, I said. You did that the moment you chose control over honesty. He didn't follow me after that. That night I returned home. My home. The locks were replaced again, this time with my keys. I walked through each room slowly. Nothing was missing. But something was different. The house felt quieter. Heavier. As if it knew something had broken that could never be repaired. I sat alone at the kitchen table. The same one where he once asked about power of attorney. And I realized something important. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't celebrate. It simply restores balance, and leaves people alone with the weight of their choices. Tomorrow would bring consequences for him. But tonight, I was finally at peace. No phone calls. No messages. No apologies wrapped in excuses. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows truth when it finally settles in. I woke up the morning after the hearing in my own bed for the first time in weeks. The sunlight came through the same window I'd installed decades ago. Everything looked familiar, yet nothing felt the same. Because when betrayal comes from your own child, it doesn't end when the court case does. It lingers. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table alone. The chair across from me stayed empty. That chair used to hold conversations, plans, laughter. Now it held consequences. Later that morning, my lawyer called. Not with bad news. Not with drama. Just confirmation. My name was fully cleared. All legal notations closed. My assets secure. My autonomy protected. Then he said something quietly. Your son's employer has requested court records. I didn't ask why. I already knew. When credibility collapses in a courtroom, it doesn't stay contained. By the end of that week, word traveled faster than I expected. Friends reached out. Neighbors stopped by. People who had quietly believed his story now avoided the topic altogether. No one wanted to admit how easily they had doubted me. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't demand explanations. It simply exists. A few days later, my son finally came back. Not unannounced. Not entitled. He knocked. Softly. I opened the door and saw a man who no longer looked certain of anything. His eyes were tired. His posture uncertain. I just wanted to talk, he said. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I owed him anything, but because closure is not the same as forgiveness. We sat in the living room. The same room where he once played as a child. He spoke first. I lost my job, he said quietly. I nodded. I know. They said the court record raised concerns about judgment and ethics. I stayed silent. Silence is powerful when the truth has already spoken. I never thought it would end like this, he continued. I thought I was being smart. That word. Smart. That's when I finally spoke. You weren't smart, I said calmly. You were impatient. He looked up at me. You tried to skip love, trust, and respect, and jump straight to control. His eyes filled, but I didn't stop. Concern doesn't call the police without proof. Concern doesn't threaten. Concern doesn't lie. He nodded slowly. I see that now, he whispered. I leaned back and took a breath. This isn't about punishment, I said. It's about responsibility. I told him something I hadn't planned to say. The court didn't take anything from you. It simply refused to protect a lie. He sat there for a long time after that. Then he stood. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just needed you to know. I understand. I watched him walk to the door. This time, he didn't look back. And for the first time since this began, I felt something release inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Acceptance. The weeks that followed were slow and steady. I reclaimed my routines. Morning walks. Old hobbies. Quiet evenings. I didn't rush to fill the emptiness. Some spaces are meant to stay quiet, to remind us of lessons learned. One afternoon, I found an old photo album. Pictures of my son as a boy. Birthday cakes. School plays. Camping trips. I closed the album gently. Love had existed. That truth mattered. But love does not excuse betrayal. And boundaries do not erase compassion. They protect dignity. As time passed, I noticed something else. I was no longer afraid. Not of the police. Not of courts. Not of being misunderstood. Because I had learned something powerful. When you live honestly, you don't need to control the narrative. The truth handles that for you. Months later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a short note. I'm trying to rebuild. I won't ask for anything. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Some apologies are acknowledged, not answered. And that's okay. Today, I live quietly. Not bitter. Not broken. Stronger. Because the greatest lesson I learned wasn't about law or justice. It was this. People who rush to control others often reveal their own weakness. And people who remain calm, patient, and truthful eventually stand unshaken. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, remember this. You don't need revenge. You don't need anger. You need clarity, patience, and the courage to let the truth speak when the time is right. Because when it does, it changes everything.